and I don't even remember exactly where this fits in the story, but I was seriously considering going back to school for ethnomusicology instead of business. I think that was before I think that was after the Peace Corps, before I started a hostel, and that kind of, fizzled out. So yeah, there were tons of decision points, and even throughout the journey, I've had plenty of times where I'm not sure, what to do next. Looking back on it, of course, it seems, straightforward and it all makes sense. But when you're in it, it's not always like that. But no, I don't think I was ever, really destined for this. I've tried to just kind of do what feels most exciting to me, and what I feel like I'm going to learn a lot from. What I feel interested in, what I feel like can make, a positive difference in the world to at least some degree. And that's kind of led me more and more towards glamping, towards sustainability, towards hospitality, towards something I can do with my wife and with my family. So it's led me here thus far, but I don't think, who knows, maybe my future will lead me in a different way also.
On today's episode, we speak with the one and only Bobby Frisch, the CEO and founder of Firelight Camps. We talked to him about his journey from his passion in music to international travels, to joining the Peace Corps and jumping into starting his first hospitality operation abroad. And all of this was prior to starting down the road that would eventually inspire him to start Firelight with his wife, Emma. What I enjoyed about this conversation is that it's often easy for us to get inside of our own heads prior to starting something new, and even more so if it's something like starting a glamping operation for the first time. But as Bobby shows us, sometimes opportunities are staring at us right in our face. And we have two options. One, believe and internalize the many logical reasons not to do it, because it's too hard or confusing, or we don't know what we're doing. Or two, jump and trust that even though we might have to sleep on the floor for a few months, and even though we'll make countless mistakes, we are at the very least failing forward. And success comes to those who have the courage to bet on themselves. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to this week's show. I am joined today by Bobby Frisch, the co-founder and CEO of Firelight Camps and an advisor to the American Glamping Association. Bobby, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Ruben.
Bobby, before we jump into the story of Firelight and how you've been able to build this kind of incredible brand and experience that guests have come to expect. We'll get to all of that. I want to kind of take it back a little bit. And if you could fill us in and talk to the listeners a little bit about the younger Bobby Frisch. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? And shine a little bit of light about the youth of Bobby Frisch.
Sure. I grew up in a suburb in Maryland outside of Washington, D.C., had a pretty normal, comfortable childhood. I'm blessed to come from a loving family, and was pretty straightforward. I did get to travel a good amount with my father, who did some international work and would often take my brother along with him, my brother and I along with him. But really kind of, didn't know exactly what I wanted to do when I grew up. I didn't have like a clear path ahead of me in terms of what I wanted to do, except for maybe the fact that I knew pretty early on, I didn't really want a normal desk office job and have never really had one. So I grew up outside of DC. I went to undergraduate in Philadelphia and was, considering taking an office job but really didn't know what I wanted, except for the fact that I loved sort of adventure. Which is why I decided to join the Peace Corps. And that's what I did directly after college. I majored in international relations and music, actually, in college. I've played the drums my whole life. So There was a point where I thought I wanted to be a professional musician and sort of gave it a half-hearted attempt right after I graduated. I was in a couple of jazz bands and did some recording in Philadelphia, which was fun, but it wasn't quite the lifestyle for me, which is why I decided to join the Peace Corps. And I was sent down to Nicaragua in Central America.
Awesome. Well, take me back a little bit. Let's go back to that international travel with your dad. I actually, the Glamping Hub headquarters is in Spain. And one of these last trips, I go there once a quarter. I took my oldest daughter, Mia. She's 5 years old. And it was just her and I, and it was a business trip, but I took her and we were able to travel around a little bit. And my hope was that it would resonate and be an experience, pardon me, an experience for her that she would remember and relate. But I don't know if that's actually going to happen. So did that actually happen to you? Do you have vivid memories? Was that travel with your dad impactful? Kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, I don't think I was quite that young in my first international trip. I think I was 9 or 10. And my dad, the first time I actually left the country, I went to Japan, which is a big, pretty exotic, culturally place to go. And I do still remember that trip big time. I think being young and being exposed to different cultures at a young age is just really huge in, forming who you are and giving you perspective on, what life can be on this planet. So it's a big blessing, I think, to be able to travel at all, especially internationally and especially to see different cultures at a young age and kind of get accustomed to that. So yeah, I do remember some of those early trips with my dad. A big formative experience for me, I think, was in high school. I did a international exchange one summer where I lived with a family in Italy and took some classes and it was mostly a cultural exchange, but I was, I think, 16. So, that I definitely remember, and it was definitely formative to just kind of be ingrained with it with another family. That was the first homestay I ever did, and I've done a lot of them since. But you're also on your own. That's the first time I traveled without my parents when I was 16. And I think that really just kind of solidified my love for travel and adventure and getting outside my comfort zone and gaining some perspective. But I've also taken my young daughters on international trips. My eldest is 4, so it's already in her blood, I think. And even if she doesn't remember the exact trip, I do think gaining that kind of early perspective is super valuable.
Awesome. So it seems like traveling has obviously been ingrained and hardwired in your DNA and something that has been important to you. Do you have a first memory of the outdoors of was that something that you had access to when you were growing up? Is this something that was important to your family, like the traveling, or was it something that you discovered a little bit later in life?
Yeah, it's funny. It's there's a little blurb about this actually in the About Us section of the website at Firelight, but I have many other examples of how, I would play outside in our backyard on our swing set and things like that as a little kid. And there was like a little stream in our backyard. So I do have some memories, but I wouldn't say I was like a big outdoorsy kind of kid. I do have like an early memory of my dad taking me fishing, and there were these like grasshopper fly things buzzing all around and smacking me in the face. I was young, maybe like 6 or 7. And I just remember freaking out and crying, and I had to wait in the car while my dad and my brother fished. So not a very outdoorsy kid, at least as a young kid. And my family wasn't very outdoorsy either. My dad is an economist. He's a real desk jockey. My brother is a lawyer. So my family wasn't really big on, big outdoor trips or anything like that. My dad is much more like a history buff, and we're sort of more cultural travelers rather than adventure outdoor travelers. I did get into it, more when I was older, more like in college, especially when I met my now wife. She is very outdoorsy, and she, would drag me along rock climbing, and eventually, she got me to love that sport as well. And so she's the one who kind of got me into camping and rock climbing. And I think we're sort of a glamping team. I'm more on the hotel side of things, and she's more on the camping side of things. So it's a good partnership.
Often takes two, right? And it seems like we're very similar, where I always joke that I'm scared to death the day that I have to get a real job. Very fortunate in loving what I do and in everything in the outdoors, and it feels like you're the same as well. But it's rarely a straight line, right? It's not a direct A to B, one path gets you there. So kind of walk me through. You went to high school, then you went to college, and then this decision to do the Peace Corps. Kind of walk me through what that was like and that experience.
Sure. Yeah, I had done some interviewing for in college for the banks and financial institutions, just kind of like because that's what my friends were doing. Never really gave it deep consideration, but it just didn't feel right to me. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was graduating undergrad, except for the fact that I knew I liked to travel and I knew I liked kind of adventure. I knew I liked cultural interchange. So, I think in the back of my head, I was thinking maybe I'll do something like work for the World Bank or some, international aid agency where I can kind of help people in developing countries. But that was kind of the unformed idea in the back of my head. After I kind of decided music wasn't going to be the thing, and Peace Corps just seemed like a great fit. It was certainly an adventure. And I figured, it would be another kind of 2 years to travel and with something that would look decent on my resume so I could go and kind of figure out what I wanted to do after that. I had, during college, studied abroad in Chile in South America. So my Spanish was already decent. So I kind of knew I would get placed somewhere in Central or South America, which I did. And I had taken some business courses in college. So I was placed in the small business development program within the Peace Corps. Peace Corps has, different programs that they place you in that kind of dictates what you do in the Peace Corps, either teaching English, there's a health program, there's actually, I think, a tech program in some Eastern European countries. And I was in the small business development program. So I was sent to Nicaragua, and in my 2.5 years there, I worked with a microfinance nonprofit. So we would make micro loans, $100, $200, $500 loans to mostly women in very rural areas to help them start small businesses. And that could be anything from like a small chicken farm to a little bakery business or a sewing business, kind of small things like that. And I also taught a entrepreneurship kind of money management class to high school students in the public schools in my little city in Nicaragua. So it was definitely an adventure, quite an experience, those 2.5 years in the Peace Corps.
Awesome. So let's fast forward after your time in the Peace Corps. I was joking on the last episode that rarely, I think there's this perception that people think that people who own or operate a glamping organization were born in a teepee or a safari tent, went to glamping university and, had this whole path built out for them. But that rarely happens. But I will say the Johnson School at Cornell University may be as close as it gets to a glamping university, as that it's renowned for hospitality and really putting through a lot of great entrepreneurs. Did you know going into the program that you wanted to get into glamping, or was it something that you got into the program saying, this is something I'm interested in, let's see how everything shakes out?
Well, so there was one step in between Peace Corps and going back to school. After I finished the Peace Corps, I was living in Nicaragua, and it was just really clear opportunity that just was staring me in the face, that Nicaragua tourism was growing very quickly. Every day we'd see more and more backpacker type people walking around our city. I lived in the third biggest city in the country, which is a small town. And there was no real cool, place to stay that was geared towards international travelers. We weren't in the main touristy part. We were kind of up in the highlands and where the coffee region, cloud forest. is. And that city, we just didn't have a single cool hotel yet. So I finished the Peace Corps. This opportunity was just so obvious to me. The country was doing great with tourism, and I, at that time I was like, well, I do want to go back to school, I think, but this was just such an obvious thing, and why don't I start a hostel in Nicaragua? It's so cheap, down there. You can start a business for the equivalent of buying like a used Hyundai in the US. And I figured, if the whole thing crashed and burned and it didn't work, then I would go back to school, go back to the US and try to go back to school. So, it was such a, it was risky, but it was relatively, super cheap to operate down there. And I also had a great friend, a Nicaraguan guy who had a big bar and kind of dance club business that already had, started some companies, and he knew the local business climate and political climate. And we partnered up and opened a hostel together. So that was really my first business ever. Doing it in a third world country like Nicaragua was very interesting. A lot of crazy stories from it. But we opened a kind of boutique hostel, I like to call it. We had bunk rooms, we had private rooms, and my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time, came up and opened a little coffee shop and restaurant in that building as part of that business as well. So we had no idea what we were doing. I'd never run any business, let alone a hospitality business. We, slept on the floor in the office for the first, 6 months to a year. And we ran it ourselves, and we definitely got our feet wet in the hospitality world running that, and kind of fell in love with hospitality from doing that. So we had run that I stayed down there for an additional 2 years running that and getting that business off the ground, and then decided to go back to school, to grad school, and went to Cornell.
So what ended up happening with the hostel? Is it still running now?
Yeah, it's still there. So we ran it for 2 years, and then I moved to Ithaca and went 2 years to business school. And right towards the end of my business school, one of our front desk workers, actually about 2 years in, met a Dutch backpacker who was staying with us. And the two of them fell in love and started dating, got married. They moved back to Europe for about a year and got married. And, she wanted to move back to Nicaragua with him, and they did. And they showed up on our doorstep one day and asked us to buy the place. I think his family had some money. Wow. So we actually ended up selling the business to her and her husband. And they continue to run it today, and they've actually expanded it, opened a second property under that brand. It's called La Buena Onda in Matagalpa, Nicaragua. So it's still down there, and it's doing great.
What was that an easy or a hard decision? I mean, they come to you, they knock on your door, you know them well. This is your baby in many ways at that point in time, where this is something that you had a lot of sweat equity in, something that, like you said, was risky. You didn't know if it was going to work. It becomes a success. And now somebody that wants to buy it from you. Was that something that you and Emma had to think about long and hard? Was it an easy decision because you knew them, or what did that look like?
Yeah, no, it was easy. We were ready, to offload it. We didn't have any intentions of moving back permanently to Nicaragua. It's difficult to manage a business from afar. We did have our Nicaraguan business partner down there, but he also had other businesses. And it was profitable, but it was, profitable in Nicaraguan dollars. So it's not like we were, importing cash back to the US or anything like that to any large degree. So, for us, it had run its course. We had learned a lot from it. It certainly helped me actually to get into business school. It was this interesting, unique thing that I could talk about that really helped me get into a business school. But we were sort of done with it at that point, and it was actually a kind of a relief to have someone show up and ask to buy it. It's not like it's a very liquid market to sell hostels in Nicaragua. So To be honest, like we didn't have very high expectations to be able to sell it. And when someone showed up who already knew the business, who we knew well, who we trusted, and was willing to buy it, we were relieved, and it was definitely an easy decision for us.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so before we jump into the story of Firelight, I'm always intrigued by the path and the journey that people take, especially business owners and entrepreneurs, because I feel like one left or one different right, one other conversation, one decision puts you on a completely different path, right? And I guess that's true for most people, but I think specifically in hospitality, it's intriguing the journey that everybody has taken. So do you feel that were you destined to be an operator of this kind? Was it something that you feel was really in your DNA, was in your blood, something that one way or the other you were going to get into hospitality, or was it more coincidence? And was there a fork in the road that led you down this path? Was that, the Peace Corps that took you down there? Was that part of your travel with your dad? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think also in podcast interviews or, in general, when people are relating their stories, they leave out a lot of the little details that, when I go look back and I tell my story, it seems linear and one thing led to the next. But there were a lot of, inflection points and decision points in there, and now I'm reflecting back on it where, I had like a random little 3-month job where I worked for a international exchange company, actually, because, I knew I liked that. It was called Education First. And I was like working with Spanish and French students in the US during their exchange programs. There was a period, and I don't even remember exactly where this fits in the story, but I was seriously considering going back to school for ethnomusicology instead of business. I think that was before I think that was after the Peace Corps, before I started the hostel, and that kind of, fizzled out. So yeah, there were tons of decision points, and even throughout the journey, I've had plenty of times where I'm not sure, what to do next. Looking back on it, of course, it seems, straightforward and it all makes sense. But when you're in it, it's not always like that. But no, I don't think I was ever, really destined for this. I've tried to just kind of do what feels most exciting to me and what I feel like I'm going to learn a lot from. What I feel interested in, what I feel like can make, a positive difference in the world to at least some degree. And that's kind of led me more and more towards glamping, towards sustainability, towards hospitality, towards something I can do with my wife and with my family. So it's led me here thus far, but I don't think, who knows, maybe my future will lead me in a different way also.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, as you were mentioning earlier, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So
yeah, there you go.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Firelight story. And can you walk the listeners through not just the story itself, but kind of where you were when the idea came up? Were you talking with your wife? Were you talking with friends? This is something that you had been kind of mulling over for a while and keeping to yourself. How did the idea really come to be?
Yeah. So after, running this little hotel hostel in Nicaragua, we'd also traveled a lot in Costa Rica and in Central America. And, ecotourism was definitely exciting to me. I loved the idea of, being outside, but being comfortable, being in these inspiring environments that oftentimes had sustainability missions, behind them. They had gardens and they were sourcing food, in a good way. They had great employment practices. So I was just generally very inspired by ecotourism in general. And wanted to go back to business school. And I kind of searched all around for sustainability programs, of which Cornell has a great one. Cornell also has a great hospitality school. So that just kind of really made a lot of sense to me. I did look at some other ones, other business schools that had sustainability programs too, because that's what I was really, really excited about. So I knew, I wanted to kind of take this ecotourism experience back to the US. When a lot of people think of ecotourism, they think of Costa Rica or Thailand But why, my kind of general idea was, why can't you have that kind of experience in a weekend destination, or in your backyard or in the Northeast where I'm from? Because there really, aren't those kind of products on the market. The U.S. does have national parks, but there aren't that many of them. They're not that accessible to a lot of people. So that was kind of in the back of my mind, and I knew I did know I wanted to start a business after business school. So, but I didn't know, glamping, was certainly not in my head at that time. I thought maybe like a cool little eco lodge, with cabins, or some sort of, maybe even an ecotourism kind of travel company. I didn't really know, but I knew I wanted to be in that industry. So I went to business school. Around that time, my wife, Emma, actually was hired by Superfly Entertainment. She had a friend there that puts on the Bonnaroo Music Festival. And they had a new program they were just launching, setting up, I think that first year it was like 200 glamping tents for the festival that they were going to rent out in their VIP area. They had a company called Contentment Camping with a woman named Pat Jensen who started it. And it was their first year, and they Superfly wanted someone to be the liaison between Bonnaroo Music Festival and her company, and they hired Emma to do it. Emma and Pat got along, really well. And I tagged along the second year she did that, and we kind of helped Pat manage the Bonnaroo glamping installation, which grew year over year. And now I think they do something like 1,200 tents or something crazy. So that was kind of our first introduction into glamping and tents. And actually, when I graduated business school, I ended up doing some consulting for Pat with her business for about 9 months, and went all over the country helping her to grow her business, doing 500 tents at Bonnaroo, 350 tents at Coachella. We did the Electric Forest Music Festival in Michigan. So we were all over the country. It was sort of like in between running a hotel and a circus, because we'd load up these big 18-wheelers with tents and furniture and go to all these big festivals all over the country, which was fun. It was totally crazy, very logistics heavy, and taught me a lot about tents, what kind of tents there are, what kind of infrastructure you need to support them, what people do, what kind of experience they're looking for, what you can create with these tents. But it certainly wasn't the sort of back to nature ecotourism experience I was looking to create. Most of the time you're in your tent and it's 3 a.m. and, I don't know, a Green Day or Jay-Z's on the main stage, blasting music, and people are having a good time, but it's certainly not like a rejuvenating experience at these big festivals. Right. But that was our first introduction into tents, into glamping, and that kind of merged in my head with this ecotourism idea I had, and and our love for the outdoors at that time. So it kind of coalesced in our head to take that kind of tented experience, but have it be quieter out in the woods, out in nature, and more of a boutique hotel kind of thing, rather than moving it all over the country. So that's kind of how the idea came together for us for Firelight Camps.
So, you have this experience. You've got the experience with the first hostel. You've got this experience at Bonnaroo. You've got a bit of confidence because the space and the field. Who did you go to first with this idea? Was it something that you and Emma, your wife, had just gone together and said, great, we're going to do this together? Did you go to different friends and family to help you kind of get through the idea? How did you go from, and who did you go to from idea to actual execution?
Yeah. So this was kind of all happening as I was in business school, and I took the opportunity to, use some of the classes there to kind of work through a business plan. And my second year in business school, I did the hotel school business plan competition. So they have a specific competition for kind of hospitality related businesses. And I wrote a business plan for something similar to what Firelight is today. It's a little different, but similar enough. And, you enter this competition, and then 10 of the businesses get chosen to pitch at like a demo day where you're on a big stage. and you talk through the business plan, and you get questions from a judging panel. So that's kind of how I got my initial round of feedback on it. That judging panel, at a place like Cornell is, these very impressive, accomplished kind of hotel people. So I'm certainly very fortunate to have been in that situation and to get feedback from those people. And it got some great reception. Glamping was still kind of unknown at that time, but even then, made a lot of sense to people, and people got excited about it. I kept in contact with a few of those judges and a few of the people in that audience, and Cornell alumni from that experience, from that demo day. I went and did about 9 months consulting then with Pat's company and gained kind of more experience in the glamping industry. And then I said, all right, I'm going to start my own thing. I went back and kind of called all those judges, raised a little bit of money. I used that time in between, importantly, to keep contact with them, let them know that I was in the industry, let them know that I was learning, keep a line of communication open. And then when it came time to actually start the business, reach back out, they had become comfortable with me. We gotten to know each other a little bit by that time, and raised our first round of funding.
And for those that don't know much about Firelight, can you give us just an overview of the Firelight camp of today?
Sure. So we are in Ithaca, New York. We actually are on the property of a boutique hotel called La Tourelle Hotel and Spa. That they have about 50 rooms. They have a beautiful spa and a steakhouse. And they have about 80 acres that borders right onto Buttermilk Falls State Park, which is this beautiful park, gorgeous, as we say in Ithaca. It's got these deep gorges and waterfalls, and you can swim at the base of a big waterfall. So we're kind of in their backyard. You can hike back into the state park. You can go to the spa and the steakhouse. And then we have these big canvas safari tents set up in the woods. They're on hardwood platforms. They have, king or queen size beds, a little private balcony in the back. And then we have a big kind of central common area with a tented lobby. We do continental breakfast. We have a full bar that showcases all of the great wines in the Finger Lakes region. And then we are just about 5 minutes outside of Ithaca, New York, which is a pretty cool little college town with a main street and bars and restaurants and shopping. So it's this will be our 6th year of operation this upcoming spring.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so when you go back, let's go back to the journey a little bit more of year 1 and year 2, and even kind of the year 0, if you will. Starting any type of business is a labor of love. There's a lot of peaks and valleys. There's a lot of unknowns and fear, and there's a lot of highs. Was there, and can you identify a main driver that kept you going? I mean, you could have gone back and maybe done some more consulting, maybe kick back up your drumming career. There's a lot that you could have done, but you stuck with this project that maybe was a little out there. Maybe people in your friends and family circle didn't understand completely. Why do it? Why see it through? Was there something that was driving you? Was there something that you can kind of point back to say, this is why I kept doing it, even though kind of in the face of it being tough and adversity to it?
Yeah, it definitely felt right, at the time. I think I'm somewhat of an intuitive person, and just my level of excitement around starting the business, around the business itself, definitely felt right. I think importantly, the day-to-day, and I really enjoyed and continue to enjoy today. And that's really important, and something I think people, maybe don't think about that much, but especially starting the business, I was raising money, putting together, advisors, and yes, building, financial models and being on the computer, setting up the website some of the time, which I enjoy, but also I was out on the site, envisioning in this beautiful property where the tents were going to go and how the common space was going to be set up, and interacting with contractors and, yes, picking up a chainsaw, and doing some of the work myself, which I really enjoy, being outside and being able to, have some physicality to my day to day also, which was super engaging and kind of helped me, just solidify the fact that this is what I wanted to be doing. So, and just the fact that I was learning so much, when you jump in head first into something completely new, you're learning so much every day. And even now, 6 years later, I'm still learning a ton, about opening new properties and the development side of things. Also, fine tuning the operations. So to me, if I'm learning and my day to day is exciting and I'm getting to do a varied amount of, things, then I kind of feel like I'm on the right path and I don't burn out.
And as you talk about that learning process, did you feel that you were set up with the advisors, with your experience to basically mean that your initial setup in that process went pretty smoothly? Or were there specific moments where you kind of took a seat and said, man, I can't do this. Like, this is just...
We did plenty of things wrong and continue to do plenty of things wrong. I think, and it was actually the same with the hostel. We did plenty of things wrong. We made a lot of mistakes. I think it's important if, you're in an industry that's doing well and there's a lot of demand for the product, then, you can afford to make some mistakes and still keep going. I remember, with the hostel, we had, 6 or 7 rooms there, and we packed every single room full of bunk beds. And we opened the first day, and like some of the first guests to come in were this retired couple, and it was this beautiful big old colonial house. And they say, "Hey, this is great. Can we stay? Do you have a private room?" And we said, "No. They're all bunks." And then the second day, another older couple came in one of the private room, and that week, we got plenty of older couples coming in looking for private rooms. We didn't have any, so actually we took a chainsaw and cut a few of the bunk beds apart and used a ratchet strap to make a king bed with the 2 twins, and converted 3 or 4 of the rooms into private rooms. So, we noticed right away that we made a mistake, didn't really know the market very well, but was able to kind of pivot, and those private rooms, ended up doing great for us. And people kept coming because there really was a demand for, a travelers oriented place in Nicaragua. It's been the same with Firelight and with Glamping. There's so much demand, I think, for people wanting this type of experience that if you make some mistakes along the way, there's still enough of a flow of people, who want the experience badly that they're willing to forgive you for it and keep coming. So that's certainly been the case with Firelight also.
So we got a good understanding of the Firelight of today and who you are today. What's the Firelight of tomorrow? If you fast forward 4 or 5 years down the road, what does that look like?
Yeah, we've got some exciting things in the works that are a bit on hold right now because of the state of the world with hospitality, with the pandemic. But we have a beautiful property down in the Catskill Mountains, which are just outside of New York City. We are planning to build our second location there. It'll be larger than what we have in Ithaca. I think one of the quote unquote, mistakes maybe that we made was maybe not thinking big enough for this first property. We're fortunate to have it be, really full almost from the very beginning. And we're kind of maxed out on our space here. But, we're just so convinced of the amount of demand out there for this kind of experience that we're building a bigger property down in the Catskills. And with more tents, you can kind of do more exciting things. My wife is really into the food side of things. She actually wrote a cookbook a couple years ago called Feasts by Firelight, which is a glamping cookbook. And she loves to cook and, craft these culinary experiences. So we're going to build a lot more of that into our property down in the Catskills. So that's under development now. We're working through all the engineering and permitting and architecture that goes into building a new site like that, which is a whole new, kind of learning process. So that's underway. And then beyond that, we're looking at a couple other locations as well. I think we've seen, and other people in the industry have seen too, that there's just this kind of demand outside of, really every city in the U.S. And there's so many great places that it can fit in. So we're kind of opening our minds and seeing where the company may go.
Awesome. Well, Bobby, thank you very much for taking the time to connect with us today. Make sure you guys check out Firelight Camps. Go to firelightcamps.com. Bobby Frisch, CEO and founder of Firelights. Thank you so much for taking the time to connect today.
Thank you, Ruben.